The rain falls softly over the churchyard of West Auckland. It's a gentle, persistent English rain, the kind that has washed over these worn headstones for more than a century. Beneath this quiet earth, in an unmarked pauper's grave, lies a woman whose name became a whisper of terror across Victorian England. A wife, a mother, a neighbor, and to history, Britain's first female serial killer, Mary Ann Cotton. To understand her story is to step into a world of shadows where poverty was a grinding, inescapable reality, and death a frequent, unremarkable visitor. Mary Ann was born into this world in the village of Low Moorsley, County Durham, in 1832. It was a time of coal dust and cholera, where life for the working class was often brutal and short. Her childhood was one of hardship. Her father died in a mining accident when she was young, plunging the family deeper into want. Mary Ann learned early that survival was a precarious thing. As a young woman, she entered domestic service, a common path. She was intelligent, neat, and presented herself well. In 1852, she married a miner named William Mowbray. It seemed a respectable start. They moved from the northeast to the south of England, following work, and started a family. But here, in what should have been the simple chronicle of a working-class life, the first dark threads begin to appear. Children were born, and with heartbreaking regularity, children died. The official cause, so often, was gastric fever, a catch-all term for the violent stomach ailments that plagued the era. William Mowbray himself eventually returned north with Mary Ann, fell ill, and died. She collected on his life insurance policy. It was a tragedy, but not an uncommon one. A widow with children to support, Mary Ann moved quickly. She married again, to a man named George Ward. He was sickly, and within a year, he too was dead. Again, the insurance money provided a small respite. Then came James Robinson, a widower with children of his own. Mary Ann entered his home as a housekeeper. Soon, she was his wife. And then, a grim pattern solidified. James's children, one by one, fell desperately ill with agonizing stomach cramps and fever. Several died. Suspicion, that cold and creeping feeling, began to stir in James Robinson. He found financial papers in disarray, debts he didn't know about. And one day, he discovered Mary Ann had taken items from his home to pawn them. In a furious confrontation, he threw her out. The children who remained in his care, they recovered. Mary Ann left, but she was not alone. She was pregnant, and she soon found a new prospect. This was Frederick Cotton, a former lover, recently widowed. She moved in with him, presenting the child she carried as his. They married quickly, though technically their union was bigamous. Her divorce from Robinson was not final. In the small, cramped house in West Auckland, the final and most lethal act of Mary Ann's story began to play out. Frederick died suddenly. Then his two surviving sons from his previous marriage. Then her own infant daughter. Each death followed a similar, harrowing script. Severe stomach pains, vomiting, profound weakness. The doctor, perplexed, would cite fever or gastritis. Mary Ann, the grieving stepmother and widow, would collect small insurance payments, or be freed from another mouth to feed. But the relentless pace of death in one small house became a local scandal. Neighbors talked. The phrase Mary Ann Cotton was said with a glance over the shoulder. The turning point was the death of Charles Edward Cotton, her 7-year-old stepson. A concerned neighbor, upon hearing the boy was ill and that Mary Ann had tried to place him in the workhouse, insisted on fetching a different doctor. This doctor, suspicious, refused to sign a death certificate. He contacted the police. Charles Edward's body was examined, and his stomach and organs were sent for analysis. The science of toxicology was in its infancy, but the test for one substance was known: arsenic. It was found in devastating quantities. Arsenic was a common household product in Victorian times, a component in rat poison, dyes, and even cosmetics. It was tasteless, easily mixed into tea or porridge, and its symptoms, violent gastroenteritis, perfectly mimicked the fevers that swept through poor communities. For someone trapped in poverty, insurance policies, often just large enough to cover a funeral, could be a tiny lifeline, a motive hidden in plain sight. Marianne was arrested. The investigation unraveled the tapestry of her life, revealing a trail of bodies that stretched back years: husbands, lovers, children, even her own mother. The press went into a frenzy. Here was a monster not in a Gothic novel, but in a humble Durham village, a woman who violated the most sacred ideals of Victorian womanhood: the nurturing mother, the devoted wife. The public could not look away. Her trial in 1873 was a national sensation. The evidence was largely circumstantial, but powerfully so. The pattern of deaths, the financial benefits, the purchase of arsenic. Her defense argued the boy might have inhaled arsenic from the green dye in the wallpaper, a real phenomenon, but not one that explained the concentrated dose in his stomach. The jury took little time: guilty. In Durham County Gaol, Mary Ann Cotton maintained her innocence even as she was sentenced to hang. On March 24, 1873, she walked to the gallows. Her final, reported words were a chilling denial: "I am not guilty." With her execution, the official story ended, but the legend was just beginning. So, who was she, truly? A calculating monster, a product of her desperate circumstances, or something in the terrifying space between? Victorian society had its clear answer: a uniquely evil corrupter of the domestic sphere. Yet the world that created Marianne was one that offered women like her almost no escape. With no welfare state, a widow with children faced the workhouse, a fate so grim that death was often preferable. The small sums from burial clubs were sometimes the only financial tool available to the poor. In this light, her actions appear as a horrifying, twisted form of survival economics. But this cannot explain the scale, the seeming ease with which she allegedly took the lives of her own children. That remains the darkest, most incomprehensible part of her story. Perhaps the most haunting theory is that she began to see death not just as a solution, but as the solution. The only way to clear a path, to gain a fleeting advantage, to maintain control in a life that offered her none. Marianne Cotton's legacy is a ghostly one. She left no grand manifesto, only a ledger of loss. There's a nursery rhyme that emerged after her death, a chilling little verse that children would skip to. Marianne Cotton, she's dead and she's rotten. She became a folk devil, a cautionary tale. Yet, her story forces us to look beyond the simple label of monster. It forces us to see the crushing pressure of poverty, the terrifying accessibility of poison, and the way tragedy can become a mask for something far worse. She is a figure carved from the dark granite of Victorian reality, a reminder that sometimes the most profound evil doesn't dwell in castles, but in the kitchen, by the hearth, in the hands that are meant to care and protect. In the quiet churchyard at West Auckland, the rain continues to fall, washing over the secrets that, like the arsenic, have long since seeped into the earth.